again, gang. I want to spend just a few minutes filling in the spaces between the selections from the monk that we have in our textbook. Now, I'm just going to summarize the important events in the main plot that will kind of help you fill in the blanks in the story and tie the selections that we have together. There actually are about 2 or 3 other storylines in the book, and they all come together at the end. But I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I don't want to confuse you with a lot of different characters' names, so we're just going to stick to the storyline that's more or less presented in our text. Now, I gotta tell you, I read this book when I was first preparing to teach this course, and it's a really good book, especially if you like love stories and demons and ghosts with a lot of mystery and intrigue thrown in. Yeah, you do have to get used to some odd capitalization and grammar, and yeah, there are some poems at the beginning of each chapter that really aren't that good, and you can kind of skip without missing anything. But if you're ever looking for a good gothic horror novel to read, I really recommend this one. Okay, now before the first selection in our textbook, Lorenzo, who is the son of a Spanish nobleman, has met and fallen in love with Antonia. So he goes to her mother, Elvira, and asks permission to court her. But Elvira says no, because Antonia's father had also been the son of a nobleman, a different nobleman, of course, and his family had disapproved of the marriage. And that had left Antonia's family so poor that her parents even had been forced to leave their son behind when they fled to Madrid to get away from Antonia's father's family. So Elvira tells Lorenzo that he has to get his family's blessings before he can court Antonia. And shortly after that, Lorenzo goes and hears a sermon presented by Ambrosio, who's this highly loved and admired monk there in Madrid, and he falls asleep. And that leads us into the first selection that's in our textbook. Now, before the next selection, some really interesting things have happened in the storyline that we're talking about, along with some stuff in a secondary storyline that's a really good story in and of itself. Okay, so one of the things that we learn before we get to our next selection is that Ambrosio, this highly respected monk, is fairly close to a young monk named Rosario. But Rosario confesses to Ambrosio that he isn't a monk at all. Rosario is actually a beautiful young woman named Matilda, who has disguised herself as a monk just to be near Ambrosio. Now, some other events happen, including one in which Ambrosio sees Matilda enter a cave, and he sees and hears a lot of strange things, like some odd music and flashing lights. And after that happens, Matilda finally talks Ambrosio into breaking his vow of chastity and sleeping with her. And at first, of course, Ambrosio's all caught up in the passion because, he'd never had sex before and she was a beautiful young woman and all that. But after sleeping with Matilda a few times, he gets tired of her. And he tells her that he wants to sleep with Antonia. So Matilda, for some reason, she must have been a really great woman who was really in love with this monk, agrees to help him. And that leads to the second selection in our text. Okay, now before the next selection, a number of surprising and shady events have taken place at the abbey where Ambrosio lives and at the adjoining convent. A lot of them are connected with that other really interesting storyline that I talked about. Okay. We have learned, though, that the abbey, and especially the convent, will take the lead in organizing the upcoming celebration of the Feast of St. Clair, which leads us, of course, to the third selection in the textbook. Now, our storyline really begins to heat up before the next selection. Ambrosio takes the myrtle that the demon had given Matilda to Antonia's bedroom after she is asleep, and he plans to rape her. But her mother, Elvira, comes in and catches him. Now, Ambrosio knows how the church and the people of Madrid will react if they find out that he had planned to rape an innocent young virgin, and that he had even rendered her unconscious through witchcraft. So he kills Elvira to keep people from finding out. Well, he's immediately filled with shame and remorse, so he goes back to the abbey without actually raping Antonia. But, of course, over a little bit of time, his shame and remorse die away, and he wants to try again. So he goes to Matilda to seek out her help. But the demon had said that he would only help Ambrosio one time, because as a member of the Catholic priesthood, after all, he is the enemy of hell, right? So Matilda makes up this potion that Ambrosio uses to render Antonia unconscious, and then he carries her into a dungeon where he rapes her, and the details of that, of course, are in the fourth selection of our text. Now, as Antonia is walking away after the end of the fourth selection, after that Ambrosio has raped her, Ambrosio grabs her and kills her. But the celebration of the Feast of St. Clare and a riot that occurs during it, which is associated with another storyline, allow Lorenzo to find the dungeon, and he discovers the things that Ambrosio has done. So the Spanish Inquisition, and that was a body of Catholic clerics who actually existed, and it was known for being particularly cruel in punishing heretics, is called in, and they torture Ambrosio to attempt to obtain a confession. Now, the final selection in our text discusses what happens after one of the torture sessions. Now, all I've done is hit some of the high points of one storyline in The Monk. Obviously, I've skipped some of the events that are associated with even that storyline, and I haven't provided any details on the points that I have covered. There's a lot of suspense, intrigue, and dealings with ghosts and demons that I haven't discussed, along with a little twist that I'm not going to give away. Really, for a Gothic novel written in the 18th century, this is a really good book. Like I said, I had problems putting it down, it was so good. It's really worth reading if you ever have the time. Well, thanks so much for listening to this little presentation. I hope it helped fill in the plot holes for you and maybe even sparked your interest to read the book. I did try to get a chance to have some fun today. Thanks a lot. We'll talk again soon.